Hello and welcome back to the Sagtikos Manor YouTube channel. Today we're going to be continuing our series of videos that will give you an overview of the Thompson-Gardiner family tree. In the last video, we met the first 5 generations of the Long Island Thompsons and even met the first Gardiner to marry into the family. In this episode, we will cover the post-Revolutionary War period through the end of the 19th century. We have a lot of people to get through, so let's begin. Isaac Thompson and Mary Gardiner's eldest son was Jonathan Thompson, born in 1773. He was only a boy during the American Revolution. In 1796, aged 23, he continued the family's tradition of marrying into prominent New York families when he wed Elizabeth Havens. Her grandfather was William Havens, who built the home known as Hardee's, or Havens House, on Shelter Island. That house is still around today as a museum and is listed on the New York State and National Registers of Historic Places. Jonathan was a distinguished merchant and politician. He started out in the West India importing business, but when that firm went under, he committed himself fully to politics. During the War of 1812, Jonathan was a prominent member of the old Democratic Republican Party and was in favor of the war. He would go on to serve as chairman of the Republican General Committee for 10 successive years. He also presided over the first public meeting held at Tammany Hall in New York City. In 1813, he was appointed by President James Madison as the collector of direct taxes and internal duties. In 1820, he was appointed by President James Monroe to be the collector of customs for the District of New York. In 1825, President John Quincy Adams reappointed him to the position. He remained there until 1829, when President Andrew Jackson removed him in order to appoint his own friend instead. It is said that his fidelity and accuracy were so remarkable that, despite rigorous scrutiny from examiners in Washington, D.C., only one discrepancy was ever found, that of 10 cents, during the Adams administration. One of the desks that Jonathan used during his long career can be seen at Sagtikos. After the end of his political career, Jonathan managed warehouses in Brooklyn called Thompson Stores and was appointed president of the Manhattan Company, the predecessor of the J.P. Morgan & Co. banking company. He was considered unostentatious in manners and a man worthy of high respect. He remained the president of the Manhattan Company until his death at 73. The next owner of Sagtikos Manor was Jonathan's eldest son, David. Growing up, David received a classical education and was only 18 when he began working for his father. 2 years later, he became the cashier of the Custom House, where he remained for 8 years. Eventually, he became the vice president of the Bank of America and the president of the New York Life Insurance and Trust Company. When he took over the New York Life Insurance and Trust Company, the business was in disarray after a scandal, but David managed to increase the share values from 80% to 600% during his tenure. He remained at the company for nearly 25 years, until his death. Around the year 1850, David was featured in a poem describing fashionable visitors to a summer hotel. The excerpt about David reads, "The Thompsons, descendants of Long Island's glory, whose ancestors' fame ascends from the sod. His name is ennobled in Manhattan's story, by virtue and justice, the good gifts of God. His mantle of honor on his son has descended, the richest inheritance mortal can hold, for vain are escutcheons if truth is not blended, amid their devices in letters of gold." He was so well respected that, when he died, Thomas W. Ludlow and William B. Astor were among the pallbearers at his funeral. Before we move on to the next manor owner, let's rewind a bit to talk about David's wife, Sarah Diodati Gardiner, or more specifically, how her parents met. Around 1803, a group of young people from Old Lyme in Black Hall, Connecticut, went for a sail on the Long Island Sound. As night began to fall, the wind wouldn't blow, and the group found themselves stranded. Luckily, they found that they were within sight of a nearby island. They managed to steer the ship and went to the manor house for help. The young proprietor of the island received his visitors graciously and passed an enjoyable evening with them. After the group left, the proprietor spoke with his housekeeper about the group. John Lyon Gardiner, the 7th proprietor of Gardiner's Island, asked the housekeeper which of the young ladies she liked best. Her answer? The Griswold girls. That's right, the island that the youngsters had accidentally landed on was the famous Gardiner's Island. 2 weeks later, he went to Connecticut to ask for one of those sisters' hands in marriage. The tall, dark-haired, and dignified Sarah Griswold was only 21 years old when she married the 34-year-old John Lyon. The Griswold family was a distinguished line that was just as old and renowned in America as the Thompsons and Gardiners. Among her ancestors were 2 governors of Connecticut. Sarah Griswold is also the one who introduced the Diodati name to the Thompson-Gardiner family tree. She was descended from Cornelio Diodati, an Italian count who settled in Lucca, Italy in the medieval period. Her great-grandfather William Diodati moved to England in the early 1700s, anglicized his name, and moved to America. Sarah Griswold honored this heritage by naming her daughter Sarah Diodati Gardiner. Sarah Diodati was known as a lady of unusual gentleness and sweetness of character, endowed with a remarkably retentive memory and a special interest in the history of Connecticut and Long Island. The younger Sarah also carried the tradition on by naming her youngest son Frederick Diodati Thompson. FDT, as he is lovingly called by Sagtikos Manor Historical Society volunteers, was born in 1847 at the family's New York townhouse at 25 Lafayette Place. FDT received the best education and attended the leading private schools of the day. He was known to be obedient and diligent, with a special interest in history that he inherited from his mother. This love of history would continue throughout his life. After graduating from Columbia College with a law degree and passing the bar, he decided not to practice his profession and instead become a banker. He worked for Bank of America for many years. After retiring, FDT devoted his time to literary work and traveling the world. He also owned the Magazine of American History and personally managed the Sagtikos estate. He wanted a home where he could entertain on a grand scale, so in 1902 he added east and west wings to the house, enlarging it to 42 rooms. Among his many travels were London, Paris, and India. He would eventually write a book about his tour around the world called In the Track of the Sun. FDT was admitted to the bar of the Supreme Court of the United States, appointed the Commissioner of the Ottoman Empire to the Columbian Exhibition at Chicago in 1893 by Abdul Hamid II, the Sultan of Turkey, and bestowed the Imperial Ottoman Order of the Medici. He was a noted philanthropist and donated 50,000 lira to the town of his ancestors, Lucca, for the construction of an ambulance. For this philanthropic work, he was made a Count of the Holy See by Pope Leo XIII and made a Count by the King of Italy. FDT passed away in 1906, aged only 55 years old. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for the next and last episode, where we'll talk about the last 3 generations of this illustrious family to own Sagtikos Manor, and even find out where famous relative Julia Gardiner Tyler fits into the puzzle. As always, if these videos interest you, make sure to schedule a visit to Sagtikos Manor. Visit sagtikosmanor.org for more information.